Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Hey Sister. Hey sister, how you doing?
Hey, sister, doing well. Just been a busy weekend, and a busy day already. So it's gonna be a busy week as we head into homecoming. So
Oh, wait, it's homecoming week. That's right, that's right. And we are so excited tonight to have a beautiful smiling face, a wonderful guest with us tonight, Miss Nadrea. Well, you know what? Let me give you all your props, Doctor.
Thank
Right?
you.
That's right. Dr. Nadrea Njoku. Is that right?
Njoku. Njoku.
Njoku. Oh, I forgot the J.
Mm-hmm.
Njoku.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, we gotta clap
Thank
it up.
you.
We gotta clap it
Thank
up. We gotta
you.
give people their credit where the credit is due. We got one of our super fans watching. Hey, Jody. Thank you for tuning in already. And in typical Hey Sister fashion, we ask that you join the conversation in the comments. If you're watching this live, comment. Hey, if you're watching this in a replay, comment. We will respond to your comments. Also, like, follow, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends that if it's Sundays or 8, it's time for Hey Sister. So we're gonna dive in tonight. I was trying to take. I was like, oh, I got some people I was supposed to text. Let them know about our show tonight. But I know they're going to be coming in, and as you come in, just let us know that you're watching. We appreciate it. We're gonna dive in tonight with our hot topics for this evening, and really, we're just gonna spend time on one hot topic because we really want to um, get into Nadria's extensive work and scholarship and all the phenomenal things that she is that makes her a phenomenal woman. But, because she is a phenomenal woman, one of the things she was like, let's talk about this as hot topics. And that's Black women and wellness, specifically our mental wellness. And so we want to spend a little time on that this evening. If you had an opportunity to watch Meg the Stallion perform on Saturday Night Live. I watched the replay today. Um, and the first performance, I can't even remember the name of the song, but she had they all were dressed up like beauty queens.
Anxiety.
Yes.
Anxiety was the name of the song.
Okay. And that was the banner that she wore, anxiety with her crown. And just really talking about um her anxiety, and she's been very candid about her mental wellness and mental illness. And we like to not say, oh, we have a mental illness, but any type of depression or whatever, it's considered mental illness, right? And we just have to be so honest and transparent and candid about what we're going through. And she recently published with this album um a page with resources for us to get some help. And I'm gonna drop it the link in the comments. The name of the page is Bad Bitches Have Bad Days Too. So, it's okay to be bad and beautiful Black woman that we are, but it's okay to have bad days. So what are some of the things you're doing, Nadria, to handle your own mental wellness, especially at this season in your life?
Thanks for that question. I was really struck by Megan's performance last night when she was rapping on anxiety. She talked about writing a letter to heaven, and she started to get choked up and started to cry because she was talking about her relationship between her mother. And I think it's been well documented that, Megan's relationship to her mother is a direct result of her mother's own pathway in the music industry. Her mother was a rapper. She was a rapper. She is a rapper. And so she talks a lot about like just needing someone who she could trust to have a sounding board. I lost my mom 5 years ago this summer, and I had that kind of relationship with my mother too. She was able to just tell me, she could give me a good curse out and tell me you're not doing, you need to get it together. You need to reprioritize, because she knew me better than I knew myself. And so it's been really important to me in this season to surround myself around by trusted women, Black women I went to college with, my line sisters, and I are really adamant about like supporting each other. Toni Morrison has a quote. It is, she gathered me up. She's a friend of my mind. She takes the pieces and gives them back to me in the right order. And no, that's what my line sisters have been for me. You know, we have a wellness collective, a wellness retreat we go on every September. And we started doing that because we lost one of our line sisters to breast cancer in the pandemic. And we just, like everyone who goes to a funeral and a family event, you know, like we can't get together just for these things. We have to get together intentionally. So being intentional about my wellness, my self-care, surrounding myself by women and women who pray. I'm an avid prayer. I believe in having prayer and praying intentionally and making time for myself in prayer and thought. And so that's what I'm doing. In addition to like therapy, being open and honest and normalizing getting help, even when you're not in the middle of a crisis, but you're doing mental, mental maintenance. You're not just cleaning up a mess, but you're maintaining your wellness. So that's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing about, your own loss of your mother. I know that it is one of the most difficult losses that loss of any parent, primary care, really your primary caregiver, right, is a big loss, and it's something we journey with for the rest of our lives, right? It never leaves us. Jody says one of the things she does is full body massage monthly in terms of taking care of her wellness. And I know that massages are very important. Massages, manicures, and pedicures are very important. But let's go a little deeper, sister. What are you doing for your own mental wellness?
Sometimes not enough. To be honest, I think that we get into the daily stuff, and because we haven't had sort of a clinical diagnosis of depression, we don't necessarily like to call it that thing, because of course we've created these negative connotations around words like anxiety and depression and mental illness and things of that effect. I was speaking to a friend recently and just learning about her having an anxiety attack for the first time and feeling like, she thought she was having a heart attack, and what that felt like. So, I am trying to be more intentional, like Nadrea mentioned, in terms of getting the massages, disconnecting a little bit. And I could certainly do a lot better. One of the things that, interestingly, I feel like this conversation is a bit of confirmation for me, because one of the perks of my job, if you will, is that we are entitled to sabbaticals, one every 4 years for 4 weeks, or one every 7 years for 4 weeks, and one every 7 years for 8 weeks. And I hadn't taken the first one, the every 4 years, and I don't want to wait for 7 years to have 8 weeks. And so I plan to take it this November. And just even in having the conversation, I just had a conversation the other day, and it's one of these work related things about, well, what are you doing? People are asking questions about what you're doing and if you're not doing enough and all of these things. And I literally was beginning to backpedal and say, all right, well, maybe I don't need to take the sabbatical right now, because I don't want to have this impression that I'm not doing enough on my job. But then I talked to my friend earlier, and then hearing this conversation, it's like, no, I actually need the time, because we've been in a pandemic. Even though we feel like we're out of it, the ramifications are still there, So
yeah. The world is different.
Yes.
The pace of work, I can just think about where and how I operated prior to March 2020 is not in this way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, being virtual, I don't know how you ladies work, but we're hybrid. But the virtual space of like having meetings back to back to back to back, I have colleagues that work till 7 p.m. or through lunch, right? And you have to make intentions of blocking your calendar so no one puts a meeting at noon. But I also sympathize and relate to what you're saying, Christina. Like, I try to take off a day after travel just to recoup, but meetings are booked on my calendar 4 weeks in advance. So how do you rearrange it and give yourself permission to take yourself off the calendar and not available to replenish?
Yeah. And then I don't know why, but it always feels like the need to explain myself when I am taking time off. Like I just don't take a day off. So for example, I took Friday off, but I wasn't just at the house chilling or going, time for myself. I was traveling to Northern California. I was meeting up with sorority sisters. We were going to a cluster conference on Saturday. We had to, meet with our regional director. We had it was a full day. And the whole time I'm on the plane, I'm writing out plans so I can meet with I work from home primarily, but meet with my colleague in the morning. So it's not like you ever can shut down. I'm still looking at emails and things like that. So it's one of those things, but you feel like you have to explain, oh, I'm taking the day off because of this reason. And it's like, I should just be able to, I'm out. And that's enough, so.
Absolutely. Well, we have a couple more comments here from Jody. She said that she went back to working out 3 times a week in terms of taking care of hers. And then she has a question for you. Doing enough? You earned that, right? It said 4 years and 4 weeks. So why you don't owe nobody nothing and no explanation? And the truth is, what we all know for sure is that at the end of this life for each and every one of us, we're not going to be asking, should I have written one more report, or should I have gone to work one more day? We know that for sure. And so it is, Mental Health Awareness Week was last week. I think last week, 2 weeks ago, sometime this month. Anyway, our mental health, all aspects of our mental health, we have to be intentional. You use that word intentional. We have to be very intentional about. And so if you want to take the day off, take the day off. If you want to go on vacation, go on vacation. Whatever you need to do to take care of yourself physically first, and because the physical health is definitely foundational for our mental health to be well. And so do that. If you need to schedule times throughout your day for meditation and reflection, there are great apps out there that you can use for that. There's so many resources available to you. So Mental Health Awareness Week was October 2nd through 8th, so the first week of this month. And so whatever you need to do, meditation, prayer, having an accountability partner and someone who will gather you in a loving and supportive way. We all need to do that. And I know that's one of the beauties and the power of our sisterhood. And so I commit to gathering both of you. How about that? And y'all commit to gathering me. How about that? Can we do that?
I'm standing in the gap for you. Sister
All right.
Demetria.
Please stand in the gap for me. I appreciate y'all. But today, the theme for our show tonight is HBC IOU. HBC IOU. Are you giving the best that you got? Like Anita said. Now, it is homecoming season, as my sister said. So, sister, you getting ready to go to homecoming?
Yes, I am.
And if you watch the show All American Homecoming, and many of you may or may not have, I watched it because my son was like, you should watch this one. He liked it. There's this episode, and they're going back to campus. They're at homecoming, but they find out that they're at a critical juncture of losing their university.
So wait, they
And
went from high school to college? Like I thought the whole All-American was them in high school. So when
they done graduated. The All-American been on 5 seasons, honey.
well, no, I know they
Yeah.
graduated, but I assumed that it was a new crop of high school students. So now they've transitioned on to college.
They have one of them who transitioned on to an HBCU and moved across the country to Atlanta to go to an HBCU.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, because that's the only place Black people are. But I mean, I digress.
All the Black people here, I'm telling you,
Yes.
Clearly.
all of them, all of them in
Well,
Atlanta. But HBCUs are back in vogue, so I definitely get them trying to get back to HBCU for the storyline.
yes, absolutely. But part of that storyline was they're at this critical juncture and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. They want to save their school. And they are at one of the alums who's a professor calls a meeting of some of those alums and bring them in the room. And she's like, okay, y'all all here for homecoming. How many of y'all have given back? And that's when like two hands went up in the room. And so I was like, oh, this is a real conversation right here. Right here. You there, you giving heat and smoke to the president, and you giving heat and smoke to everybody who you know who works there. Or have you given back? And that's one of the reasons why our guest is here tonight. So her official title, Dr. Nadrea Njoku, is she is the director of the UNCF Frederick D. Patterson Research Institute. And she was recently featured in a PBS story regarding HBCUs and like you said, they're in vogue again, and how enrollment at HBCUs are up compared to other colleges where it is down, and they were exploring why. And but Nadrea got to the heart of the matter and talked about funding. So tonight we want to have her on to kind of go really deeper into funding. So what does HBCU funding look like? How do public and private colleges, how they're funded differently? Really where your dollars go? What are some of the challenges that are being faced? And so she's spent a lot of her work on this. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about her scholarship and her scholarly work as well. But let's talk in general about HBCU funding. Um, People heard that Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, gave all of our schools a whole lot of money. Let's get to the real deal about
Well,
that.
not all of our schools. I just wanted to say that real quick.
Yes. Well, she gave Xavier University some money. But yeah, let's talk about that because Prairie View, I think the several schools. I can't remember them all. But yes, tell us about hey, how are HBCUs funded?
Sure. I think all higher education work, nonprofit organizations work on a very important pot of money called endowments.
Mhm.
And HBCUs were founded both just prior to and after the Civil War. They were primarily funded by religious organizations. Our alma mater, Xavier University, was funded by a Catholic order through St. Catherine Drexel. There are the AME, American Methodist Episcopal Church. There are
African Methodist Episcopal.
African Methodist Episcopal Church. There is a Seventh-day Adventist HBCU. There are different orders, and then there are our philanthropic HBCUs that don't really necessarily have a Christian affiliation, but had philanthropic or very wealthy families. So, for instance, Spelman College is a wealthy family that founded an HBCU. So they were either funded privately by Christian organizations and philanthropic organizations, or they could have been land grant institutions like Southern University, Prairie View, or publicly funded institutions. These pots of money either grew or were stifled and did not grow in the same ways that institutions like our Ivy League institutions like Harvard University, the University of Pennsylvania, Rutgers, their endowments grew in different ways because they also benefited from slave labor. So they were founded in a much earlier period and benefited in different ways from different pots of money. When you look at endowments today, the 81 most elective institutions have an average of $1.6 billion in their endowment. Non-HBCUs have $36.7 million on average in their endowment. However, on average, all HBCUs have an average of $13.7 million. We know that some HBCUs...
We need to drop those numbers.
Again?
Yeah, let's get those numbers again.
Well, I got all HBCUs have an average of 13.7 million endowed funds.
And then, but the one with the bill is what I want to hear again.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you said the 81 most selective
have an average of 1.6 billion. So, you know, I want to be on here and speak the facts. So, Spelman is approximately 375 million, their endowment. However, Harvard's is in the billions, right? And so the endowment is that percentage, the percentage of the revenue off the top of that. So the creme de la creme, the cream off the top of the endowment is which gives HBCUs that operating budget, right? So if I have 13 million and somebody has $1 billion, off the top, I'm gonna have more resources and more funds to work with. In addition, prestige influences philanthropists today to donate extra money. So the prestige of Harvard, just in itself, rich begets rich, right? People think, well, I want to give to higher education. Where should I give? Harvard, Yale, Penn. The same when you think about HBCUs. People often recall Spelman, Howard, Morehouse, and Xavier when they think about HBCUs. But there are the institutions like our Lane colleges, Payne, Miles College, Southern University of New Orleans. Those smaller community-based private and public institutions don't get as much attention for their endowments. So endowments are really important when we're talking about funding. Now, when we're talking about giving back, one of the big things about giving back is we talked to my Mackenzie Scott. The reason why Mackenzie Scott's donations to HBCUs are a game changer was because she largely gave unrestricted funding. She gave the money because that's what she wanted to give. She said, I'm giving you this, you do what you want. However, if me and Demetria, not that we would decide to do this, but say we decided we wanted to create a scholarship at our institution, that's restricted. Mackenzie gave unrestrictedly, we might give restrictively. My line and I, we have an endowed scholarship. We're giving restrictively. So we're restricting how those funds are distributed into the institution. When you don't have a big endowment, unrestricted funding becomes critical because you're then able to fund the annual budget of that institution from that money. When we're talking about HBCUs, I don't know if you've ever known anyone to work at an HBCU, but they might have a title with 7 jobs underneath that title. You know, our favorite dean of students, Dean Byrd, was the vice president of student affairs, but he was also the advisor to the National Pan-Hellenic Council. You know, he also, Dean Alcorn was also over student conduct, where there's an institute like a Indiana University, they might have a vice president for student conduct under their dean of students. So you have these institutions with very well skilled professionals and their skills are stretched out into multiple functions. They have to do a lot of things. And so institutions like HBCUs often have to stretch the dollar for longer, so they do more with less. However, that means that they also have deferred maintenance. So we did a survey in Patterson, like just surveying how institutions spent the federal funding that they got from the CARES Act, which was during the pandemic federal funding. But also they may have gotten all of those billions of dollars, but on average, the private HBCUs have 5 million or more deferred maintenance. So deferred maintenance are the nooks and crannies, the bills, keeping up the facilities, the residence halls, the cafeterias, the gyms, the things that students come and see and decide really if they want to come to an institution. Those are the deferred bills. Bills we would pay, but we either don't have the resources, we don't have the capacity, or we don't have the funding to handle those funds at that time. So that's why we see a renaissance of attention towards HBCUs, and obviously more funding coming, but we're still needing greater, we still have a greater need to supply these institutions with more resources, because until we get to the $1 billion endowments at our institutions, where we could just breathe off the, the residual of the endowment, we're going to continue to need more and more because our students continue to need more.
Mm-hmm. Oh, girl, you have said a lot already. I don't.
Sorry, I didn't want to go that deep, but I can't just say one thing. I got to put it all out there.
No, but I appreciate that, because I think, when you just talked about that endowment, and making it really plain, like how you can live off of the residual of that endowment, but that some of the other institutions, and Ivy specifically, or some of these more selective institutions, had a few hundred years head start. B, that many of their institutions, and now they're trying to wrestle with that. And Harvard is one who's been very public about wrestling with it. Part of them building those funds came off of slave labor, right? And so they are still in a very public way trying to repair that and some of their policies and what have you. But having that, like you said, that cream off the top, so that you can actually then be about the business of what you're there to do, and that's educate, and that is grow the next generation of leaders, that is help build a skilled workforce who will be able to continue to take our country on and on and on, because that's really what part of what we're meant to do, right? Yeah. Sister, do you have a question before I jump into the next topic?
No, I just wanted an explanation from Nadrea. Obviously, you all went to a private institution. I went to a public institution. So again, just talking through some of the resources that are available for each type of institution.
Right. So we see some of the most small, and unfortunately under-resourced institutions are the privates, because they were privately funded. So as as the resources of that private institution might get smaller, so do the resources they have to give to these institutions. Public HBCUs, however, get a state allocation. Now, states have, because
have not been getting their state allocation.
I'm going to get into that.
Okay.
Because states can determine how they allocate their money, some institutions get allocations based on performance. But we already know that the metrics to determine who is performing and who isn't performing can differ greatly by who you measure and how you're measuring them. So if you're talking about retention rates, and we know that there is an institution that serves adult learners, and so adult learners might take longer to graduate, so they don't get that in and out by 4. They might be getting in and out by 6 or 7, or there are Black students who go to HBCUs. You know, HBCUs are the great equalizer for higher education. So they're access institutions. They're able to give students at the lowest 40% access to higher education at a greater level than your Ivies or your state institutions. So those students might need more time to graduate. So if we're performance funding based on time to graduation, we already know HBCUs are going to get less. And then there are well-documented lawsuits. Maryland is one. There has been investigative reporting around Tennessee's funding towards Tennessee State University. I think they said that that's upwards of like hundreds of millions. Florida A&M students have just galvanized and gotten together, and they're pushing a lawsuit against the state of Florida. So there are state-funded institutions that are not getting their state allocations at the same level. If you go to Tennessee State University and go to University of Tennessee, you can see the drastic differences. Let's go and walk through Southern and then walk through LSU. So those are some of the differences. Just because those are big name institutions with huge brand recognition, Southern is huge in Louisiana, that doesn't mean that they don't need funding and they don't need resources. They might wield a lot of culture, tradition, and our favorite brothers and sisters. My mother went to Southern. Those our favorite alum went to those institutions, but they need as much support and help as the biggest brand names. They need as much help as the smaller HBCUs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat here in a minute about a couple of articles. So one, there was an opinion piece done in the Washington Post earlier this year, written by Tony Allen and Glenda Glover, who happens to be the former international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, as well as the president of Tennessee State University. And they wrote an opinion piece in the Washington Post. And then there are also, as you said, there was really good investigative reporting that was done on, and they showed the billions of dollars gap that if these land grant institutions like a Southern, like a Tennessee State, like a Texas Southern, if those schools had been funded at equally as to their counterpart land grant institution, what it would have meant. And it's not in the millions, it's in the billions. And I think Morgan State right now is another one that has a lawsuit. We know that's how Jackson State, actually, they sued the state of Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just Jackson State. I think it was Jackson State, Valley, and Alcorn. Yes.
Mhm.
So, all right. So we got a comment here from a TSU alum, Tennessee State. It says most HBCUs had housing issues, which will now trickle down for the following year or years to come. We don't have enough funding to build as fast as students being accepted. And I think that goes to what you were talking about, those deferred maintenance dollars. So if you could kind of, what is deferred maintenance? Just off top, like how is that defined, and what does it actually mean?
So deferred maintenance is maintenance work that is either postponed due to limitations in available resources such as time, staffing, funds. That could be both planned, like a new residence hall, because we've had a residence hall around for 40 years, but maybe we need a new one. So maybe we don't have the financial or staff resources to build a maintenance hall, or that could be unexpected breakdown. So we're talking about Tennessee State. Tennessee State had an issue one time where they had they didn't have hot water or functioning water in the residence halls, so that they had to bring in mobile showers and bathrooms for their students to access and use during that time. So do you have enough money in your coffers for the emergency?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you have enough resources to respond to a campus culture where students would want to live in a hotel rather than a residence hall? Like, there are still HBCUs without central heating or central air, not central heating, but central air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That is definitely an issue. Well, you work with UNCF. So there's UNCF and then there's the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. Tell us the difference, because people hear UNCF because, honey, we all heard Lou Rawls talk about a mind is a terrible thing to waste. We all grew up with that. Not as many people have heard about the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, unless you've gone to a public HBCU. So tell us about the difference. And we're going to run their websites along the bottom here because y'all can donate to both of them tonight if
Right.
you want to. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the biggest difference is the United Negro College Fund has been around more than 78 years. The Thurgood Marshall College Fund was founded in 1987. So there's a gap in years there. We talked about the differences between state funding and then private resources or philanthropic resources. One of the primary reasons why UNCF was funded was because the then president of Tuskegee University, Frederick D. Patterson, which the research institute that I direct was named after him. He was noticing that every time he would go out to fundraise for Tuskegee, Mayor McLeod Bethune would be out there fundraising with the same people. Willa Player would be in there fundraising for Bennett College. All the presidents were asking the same people for the same pot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided that, why don't we pull our resources together and fundraise collectively? And we could probably fundraise collectively and distribute those funds in a more efficient and effective way than trying to work against each other. So it's about the collective good. And then, so UNCF obviously has a more brain recognition. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a great thing to invest in. It's an iconic slogan and brand. The Thurgood Marshall College Fund is most certainly iconic, but much smaller effort and a younger effort. But what we're doing at United Negro College Fund is we're trying to be intentional about working alongside the Thurgood Marshall College Fund and pooling our resources because we have the same mission and we're serving the same students.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, sorry, a big, huge difference is the United Negro College Fund are private institutions, and the Thurgood Marshall College Fund serves public institutions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So a mind is a terrible thing to waste at both a private and public institution. So you can donate there, both of those, uncf.org or tmcf.org. That's really easy for you to remember. We're going to drop those in the chat later as well so that you can consider donating there. You talked a little bit about restricted and unrestricted and scholarship funds, which I think is so very important because I like to use the church analogy. The unrestricted funds is like your building fund, right? It's to make sure that the light stays on, that the parking lot stays paved, that everything stays painted. The pews, if they get old, we have to order new hymnals. That's what unrestricted annual general dollars for. If you have a scholarship fund or an endowed scholarship, it is restricted. Sometimes programs, you might hear, oh, this program was awarded by this wonderful company, and it's restricted to STEM majors, right? And so it's nice. Okay, we got new computers, you build this new STEM lab, but the paint is chipping off of the ceiling because we have not been able to maintain this structure. And that's why we need to have both. So we got a comment here. want to hit it says, this is amazing. I am so adding both these organizations to my will. I went to Catholic college, very well funded by the Catholic Archdiocese in Chicago. What a difference.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk
Yeah,
about.
let's talk about that. Adding it to your planned giving, because I don't think
Mhm.
enough of us even think about um planned giving, or having a little insurance policy that we put that we have named one of our institutions or one of these organizations as a beneficiary.
Yeah, we I was one of the founders of the 1925 Society, which is behind um I would say the resurgence of revitalization of young people going to homecoming at Xavier. That wasn't
Hmm.
something we had when I was there. But the 1925 Society is also the group of individuals that have decided to give to Xavier in their will, have willed funds to two separate things, but every institution, including UNCF, have pots of money of people who have decided to just will something. It could be funds. It could also be assets. It could be stocks that you give to an institution. It could be land that they could end up selling, or and getting the profit to an organization that you put in your will. And then also, an example that we have at Xavier is our former president, Norman C. Francis, was known for always having an automatic draft. I don't know how much he had in his automatic draft, but I have an automatic draft of $100. It just, before I even see it, it goes. So if you have, that's $1,200 for the year. You might not have that from your pocket in one setting, but over 12 months you will have it. So it's about giving what you can. And then those giving days that we have at all of our institutions, we have Give Love Xavier. I'm sure Southern has one, where it's a day out of the year that you give. Those are most of those funds go to the annual fund, the church
Hmm.
fund, the building
Hmm.
fund,
The
not
building fund.
the building fund, not the love fund for the president, but the building fund for
Right.
what's
Yeah.
planned and what's unexpected.
Absolutely. Well, so then what would you say our responsibility is as alumni? I like the automatic draft. And we had this conversation recently at the Alumni Leadership Conference in Houston. And one of our fellow alums, we were talking about, people sometimes get intimidated when they see the big splash. Oh, 10,000, 5,000, 250,000, but not understanding the value that, but if we have 20,000 in our alumni database, and each of them gave $100, just 100, that's $2 million that will go to unrestricted funds. Like, it's that simple. And so when you think about how many people are going to descend on Southern University this week, if each of them gave $100.
Pass the basket.
You got a basket, sister? You got an envelope? Like, you could bring them an envelope. Here your envelope. But it's really that simple. Like, because there will likely be 15 to 20,000 people there, easily. And then if each of them gave $100, that's $2 million. What could that $2 million do for your facilities and for the maintenance in the facilities? um Having an automatic draft of $100 a month, or whatever it might be, um whatever it might be. Yes, you're gonna have to
Kim
take
said
us
she's
on the
gonna take
road.
us on the road. Listen, I have strong feelings about this. So, anybody that knows me knows I love Xavier. I mean, and this is not just my Xavier classmates. I got both a master's and a PhD from Indiana University. I will agree Xavier sweatshirts. I was there far more years than I was at Xavier, right? Everyone knows I love Xavier. And I have strong feelings about giving back, but I have strong feelings about the ways that we give back. Because We also have a bucket of research we do in Patterson about social mobility. And Xavier is the first in in the success factor, what we call the success factor. And that's the bottom 40 going to the top 60, right? Like that's like not just moving from low to medium. That's going from low socioeconomic to like high. That's like I qualify for Pell, but now my family, my total family income is more than $500,000, and that's because we have all these doctors, all these pharmacists, veterinarians, dentists, PhDs in our ranks. But one of the big parts that we need to remember, especially young alum, and Xavier preaches this, it's about time and treasure. It's about giving your time and your treasure. And so
come on, Chrissy, what's your quote? What's your quote, Chrissy? Tell what the part of it here.
Talent, and treasure.
Time, talent, and treasure. And so when we're 20, 25, 30, we might still be in graduate school, or maybe we have a huge student loan. Student loans
burden,
are big,
burden.
right? Like I could make $500,000, but I might have $250,000 in loans. So like, then you got to subtract that, right? So it's about giving your time, your treasure, and your talent to your institution. So yes, Kim, we will go on the road, our time and our talent, but we do when we finally get to the point where we have liquid, what do you call that?
Liquidity
or expendable income.
Oh,
right? Disposable income. You need to give that as well. But don't be intimidated. Give what you can and give of what you have.
Listen, I have a child who's a student right now, and I'll give Love Xavier Day. I called him and was like, your class has a page. I do not see names on it. You need to give at least $5. You know how I know he had $5? Because I gave him $5, right? And so what I'm saying is, I think, creating that habit, I think that's one of the things we have to be very intentional about, is creating that habit. So I know early on in the early days, I did not have a lot to give. And I don't think any of us do early on in our professional careers, because we're just coming out figuring things out. But some people do, right? And because, they get their nails done every week. So if you skip your nail appointment 1 week, that's $40 a month.
That's $150. That's more than 40.
Well, let me say that.
Depends on your technician.
Yeah. So if you do $50 a month, that's $600 a year, right? So there are ways where you can be intentional about giving. And I think that's a part of it. It's about the planning process. It's about the thoughtfulness. It's about understanding what the bigger and larger picture is, and that many hands make for light lifting. So if all of us, like I said, if 20,000 people gave $100, that's $2 million. And most of us can give $100 a year, because that's $10. Actually, $10 a month is $120. So that'd be $2.2 million.
Well, I'll say this. So at Southern, we have the 1880 Society, and I do give, and I give monthly to that fund. In the same way, I just did an automatic draft. It doesn't preclude me from giving to other areas, because I know that there is a give day for Southern. There is their sorority. We raise funds and have different competitions from a chapter, undergraduate chapter standpoint. There's a multitude of things that happen. And then there's the, giving to the Alumni Federation versus the foundation in the case of, Southern, and giving those things. I think so I do it because I feel like that is a part of my obligation. I do it because even when I was speaking to one of my friends and former colleagues who did not attend an HBCU, he actually attended University of Michigan. Obviously, Michigan is huge. I'm sure they're one of those schools with one of those very plentiful endowment funds. But one of the things he said was for him not having as many Black students right there, is he felt it was an obligation for him to give so that whenever there is an issue,
There's a 17 billion, by the way.
17 billion. Okay. When there is an issue though with Black students, they can say because of that 17 billion, I'm sure the percentage given by Black alum is minuscule. He felt like he needed to give in order to have a voice so that when issues come up for Black students, they can't just say, well, y'all don't give anyway, so why do we need to address your issues? And I think the same idea happens for our HBCUs. If there's no other reason to give, I would say we should at least give to have a seat at the table, because we can't complain about the things that are not happening if there's no evidence of us working to improve the things that are happening. Right. So I know alums who have a voice with the board of supervisors, or who have a voice with the president of the university, because they give regularly. And if you don't give regularly or at all, it's kind of hard to then say what the things that are not happening.
Yeah.
But needless to say, there's a disconnect, right? Because the alumni giving for HBCUs across the board is extremely low. So what are the things that can be done to boost more of that, in your opinion, Nadrea?
Yeah. I think you socialize giving. So I don't think you are a giver once you graduate. You become a giver your first day, right? Homecoming is a big part of that. And giving those who give time, talent, and treasure a platform in your institution that young people can observe and model is one of the biggest parts of creating givers from the first day they enter the institution until the day they leave. So you have to socialize giving. Another way to do that is, to give in small parts. I think what people don't understand is that if you give $5 or give 5 million, you're counted in the number. And you need to understand the seriousness, because of the way that philanthropy works, the seriousness of what the number means for the person that wants to give. So one of the first things philanthropists do when they decide, or they're like researching where they're going to give their money, is they want to look at who gives. So if they look at our institution and they see no one gives, not even alum, for them that's a mark of satisfaction. They may not understand the nuanced reasons why we don't give. Student debt. Black people are very particular about how they give. If they give them money, it could be one little incident that make you feel like you shouldn't give. But your institution will not benefit if you don't give. Because philanthropists need to know that if I'm giving, I need to know alumni are also giving. So it's about understanding the seriousness of being in the number. And again, rich begets rich. Giving begets giving. So if your alumni are giving, philanthropists are more inclined to give, because at least that's some data that if they invest in the capacity of this institution, there will be someone else behind them contributing and giving on to that capacity and that investment.
Can you talk about that just a little bit more? Because I just had a recent conversation with, so there's a group of engineering alumni at Southern who are trying to do a big effort. And of course, a lot of it is around the giving aspect, right? Giving scholarships to attract students to come back into engineering. And of course, if you're an engineering student, like if you're a student who is going into medicine or what have you, you have to have a certain acumen for math and science. These are just things that are. Can you talk a little bit more about some of those other things that when people are wanting to give, what they look at? Because I tried to have that conversation too about the whole Mackenzie Scott thing, her employing AI, artificial intelligence, and using different metrics. And obviously, again, unfortunately, my institution wasn't amongst the ones that received funds from her. But I feel like trying to get people to understand all the different things that philanthropists would look at in order to determine, even AI aside, the type of things that they're looking at in order to decide, hey, I should invest in this institution.
Well, I want to make 2 points about investments, but I think one of the things that I know is that people don't give to institutions, they give to people.
Mm.
So it's often about the relationship that a philanthropist has with either the giving officer at that institution or the president. So sometimes the money that you see someone give, let's talk about Reed Hastings of Netflix giving to, he gave 40 million to Morehouse Spelman, and then I think he gave 40 million to UNCF, which UNCF then redistributed to their other private institutions. That gift could have been 10 years in the making, right? It's about cultivating relationships. So I think that's one thing we really need to understand about, like, what was the meaning or the relationship behind what was given. Being a giver and, like you said, being at the table. Like, who was at the table when they were advising Mackenzie Scott on whom to give to? Or let's just any of the philanthropists, right? So if you don't have a Southern University graduate at the table to say, hey, you need to point it this way, because I'm a testament and I got the data to say why you investing in my institution matters. But I think another part of giving that we've seen at UNCF, and I'm seeing other philanthropists do that's really important, is not just giving money, but giving resources and building capacity into an institution. So the engineers that Southern is producing, there may be a scholarship fund, but what type of student success innovations and structures are those funds putting in place so that whomever comes in that pipeline is successful through the pipeline and after they exit? You know, what kind of support services? And that is one of the biggest things about HBCUs is that it's like a grandmother who comes and hugs you. You know, like a grandmother with, like, she hugs you and like you can't breathe. Like everything about her just engulfs you and you can't get away from her. She's intrusive. She won't leave you alone. You know, she's going to bother you. She's going to call you on Sunday. Make sure you got some, make sure you got cookies, but make sure you study. You know, that's what HBCUs are. And so we not just have to give scholarships, but we have to help to ensure that they can maintain those student success initiatives and innovations and give to their students in a way that ensures their students are successful. Because HBCUs, you are 51% more likely to move socioeconomic statuses and move up in your socioeconomic standing if you go to an HBCU than any other institution. And that's because of what you find, what you get, and what you experience at that institution, not their name. You can go to Harvard if you want. You can go to Yale. You can go to LSU. But you're not going to get there what you will get at the comparable HBCUs.
So can you give some other stats? Because I think that's an amazing one. 51% are more likely to move up on their socioeconomic standing by going to an HBCU. And see, we're constantly fighting this battle, whether it's public or private HBCUs. We're constantly fighting this battle of as if our degrees are somehow inferior. You mentioned going to Indiana University. Demetria and I both went to Tulane after our HBCU experiences. And I don't go to Tulane's homecoming. They send me stuff, and maybe one day I will.
It's this week.
Oh, well, then maybe one day I
This
will.
weekend? Or no, or is it next weekend? I can't
I
remember.
don't
I
know.
had it.
I don't
I
know.
had it. I had it. That day, the Blue Wave. No, there's something else they sent about this. Yeah, them qualifying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
I
I
get
mean,
all the stuff. I've given a whole lot less than I give Xavier, but I have given.
because I'm not even going to lie. I really don't, because there's a part of me that feels like they're going to be all right no matter what, and I know that my HBCU, it's a different situation, and so yeah, I just, there was I think there was a graphic that UNCF had many years ago, punching above their weight class.
Oh yeah, yeah. So punching above their weight is particularly
Thank you for correcting that. Punching above
yeah,
their weight.
yeah, punching above their weight. That came from our economic impact study, where we looked at the economic impact of each HBCU, both nationally and statewide. That's about like the dollars that HBCUs produce. I want to get to that statistic, but I want to make sure that I get it right. But punching above their weight is, again, doing less with more, right? Like, that's like
I
a
think I have a
welterweight.
page. I have a
You do?
page on
You got a
that. Hold
page. You're
on.
gonna drop it.
I done pull the page up so y'all can see for yourself. Here the graphic
Oh,
go.
there
There
we
you go.
go. There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you see the graphics, so you see the numbers, but I'm going to give you some more numbers as let's take that in. HBCUs make up 3% of all higher education institutions. And while they make up 3%, they enroll 10% of all Black students. They award 17% of bachelor degrees by Black students, and they award a quarter of bachelor degrees in STEM to Black students. So that's like a welterweight champion punching Mike Tyson up, punching above your weight. There is a popular saying, and I have been on the hunt to sort of verify this in, like, because data can get stale, right? In the 80s, they said 80% of HBCU alum roughly account for 80% of Black judges, 50% of Black doctors, and 50% of Black lawyers. I want to validate those statistics in 2001, 2022 graduation rates, but that's an example of how HBCUs go above and beyond their resources. We talked about their endowments, and that's despite those small endowments, despite the deferred maintenance of at least $5 million. They're giving more than they were ever allocated. And then a really important statistic, and I talked a lot about social mobility rates, and I'm going to give Demetria the link to our report, Transforming Generations, which talks about these data points around social mobility. The biggest groundbreaking data that we've gotten recently is that, when you look at HBCUs, or when you look at the rate of higher education institutions moving students from the bottom 40% to transition to the top 60. If you went to an Ivy institution, your percentage, or your percentage of doing that, going from the bottom 40 to the top 60, will be 7.4%. HBCUs do that at 34.3%. Christina is a Southern grad, so I got to pull out a Southern statistic.
Southern engineering specifically.
When you talk about mobility rate, Southern has a mobility rate of 40.4%. So on average, Ivy, Howard, Yale, Princeton is 7.4. Southern's is 40.4. Gramblin's is 43.7.
And this is the kind of stuff that I feel, if alums heard more of this, then maybe it would resonate more than just give. Because if you ask me to give and I go on campus, for example, and there's chipping paint or a water main break or something, the streets are torn up, even though the streets are owned by not the campus, even though they're through
they attribute it to the student.
School.
It's like,
yes,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then if you have a kid who lives in the dorm and they're complaining about, I lived here and it was so terrible and horrible. Yes, but there's a risk. First of all, there's an obligation as a former student to give back to the institution so that the next generation, and in the proper places, right? Mm-hmm. So that the next generation won't have some of those issues. But at the same time, there is the piece that if you hear what we're producing and you deeply understand it and you see the numbers, and we talk about the numbers, then I think people would be more compelled. Because again, if you go on campus and you're not seeing it, then you feel like, well, it's no point in me giving. They're not doing anything with the money.
We have to talk to alum, but we also have to talk to parents, right? I think, parents that's my son speaking about parenting. Parents, yes. Yes, we can go there. Okay. It's what? It's so far away. We'll get on a plane and go. Okay. Parents put our dreams on our children, right? We dream big dreams for them. We got to dream big HBCU dreams for them. And know that these statistics mean that they'll be able to take care of us far and beyond if they go to an HBCU rather than an Ivy. Now, if an Ivy presents or give, yes. Yep. So if an Ivy gives you an opportunity that an HBCU can't, sure. I mean, maybe, there's a major or a subset or something very specific that you can find in Penn that you might not be able to find at an HBCU. That's a real thing. But if we're talking about undergrad experience, being nurtured and supported, go to an HBCU. You're gonna come out better and much far ahead than your peers.
And we started off this conversation today with our hot topic around that wellness and about our mental health. And it is a real thing. And I remember a few years ago going to an initiation ceremony for one of my friend's daughters at Harvard. And it was interesting to me that all of those girls were minoring in African American studies. And I was like, because that is the place that they're looking for their belonging. And at an HBCU, then they don't have to do that, right? Now, your scholarly work, and I know we're a little over time, so we'll kind of go quick here, but part of your scholarly work, your dissertation was on the socialization of Black women at HBCUs. I want you to talk about that a little bit and then get into your Black Girl on Campus website, because it's kind of a continuation of that work that you did. Yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So my dissertation interviewed 10 Xavier alum Black women, and I just went with them. I went through with them from the moment that they decided they wanted to go to Xavier until the day that they graduated. What was that experience like? And what did Xavier impart for them? What their definition of Black womanhood? And one of the things that I really found was that at Xavier, like many HBCUs, the women who talked about every single woman had a deep love for Xavier. And they would all say they would make that choice again. But the Black women that talked about having them, I saw, I conquered experiences, were our campus queens, our sorority girls, those who were chosen. Because there were other participants who wanted to be in a sorority and didn't, make it, or they didn't get picked. But the ones with the most social capital fit in our in our perception of what a Black woman should be. ladylike, straight permed hair, you know, beautiful, pageantry. But then there were the Black women that were on the margins, you know. There were, you know, my lesbian peers, my peers who, you know, sought to be a part of a certain group and didn't get in, or wanted to be a doctor, but found out, you know, later on they should have been a French major, right?
Mhm.
They were failing out of school trying to be a doctor and making straight A's in French. So, you know, my work in Black Girl on Campus in particular is about documenting the narratives of Black women in higher education, and all Black women, not just traditional age residential students, but also adult learners, you know, women who decide, like my mother decided when I was in second grade to go to school, you know, women who decide like, I can't do anything, I can't be my best self unless I get this degree for me and my child, or me and my family. So Black Girl on Campus, you can go to the website. The campus has the website has different resources for scholars, but my collaborator, Dr. Lori Patton Davis, and I, we have funding from the Lumina Foundation to do digital narratives of Black women in college. And it's just about creating the narrative and the story about documenting the nuance and the heterogeneity. Like, we're not a monolith. Every Black woman is different. You both came out of the same household, your sisters, but I know you're so much about you is alike, but you're probably complete opposites in many ways, right?
Well,
So
you see, we don't necessarily look that much alike, so we get that often.
It's okay. It's all right. Same blood, you know, and same bond. But yeah, you know, Black women are so different. We come in all different shapes and sizes, shades, but we get the same label put on us. And I want to make sure that Black girls on campus document the different ways we experience college.
That's very powerful. I appreciate that. So folks can catch her here on, this is her Twitter handle, so you can find her there. If you Google Nadrea Njoku, her name is gonna come up. All these appearances she's had on TV, all of her scholarly work. Because if you go do the Google search, it has Google Scholar, and it has all the things that she has either authored or have been a part of authoring. So she is all that and then some. And I appreciate you joining us tonight on Hey Sister and sharing the work that you're doing and this very important conversation. So I would say as we are kind of keep getting into this homecoming season, you know, the theme was HBCU IOU. Are you giving the best that you got? Hopefully we gave you some information and insight about not only why you should be giving, but what is your best? And if your best is in time and talent, then we want you to give that. If your best is in treasure, and based on the social mobility numbers that she showed, a lot of us are doing better than we could have even imagined. And so really it's about how do we then prioritize those institutions that laid the foundation in us to just be on the path in this part of our life journey and where we are. And so that's all I have in closing. Nadrea, Christina, I'm going to go to Nadrea first, and I'm going to go to you, sister. What do you want to say to the folks in closing?
First, I want to thank you both for having me. I think this is a beautiful thing. I wasn't blessed with a blood sister, but I have many chosen sisters. And so I want to thank you all just for taking time to pick me out. I'm sure a long list of possible guests, but then amplifying my message of who I am, and I appreciate that. And yes, I'm all about HBCUs all day, every day, giving back, and then just choosing the Black experience for our children is always the best choice. Giving them a space to be themselves unapologetically without having to think about the other peers. And you know, Xavier always gave me the sense that I was competing against other Black geniuses. So I want that for everybody. Thank you.
Absolutely. Christina, what about you?
I love that. No, I was going to say thank you so much for being here. We've done a number. This is probably about our fourth show on HBCUs and HBCU giving, alumni participation, and things like that. And it's because it really is near and dear to our hearts. I think, of course, my sister is in the process of running for national alumni president for Xavier University. Of course, I have chartered a chapter here in the state of Arizona for the Southern University Alumni Federation. So we're 4 years old as of July. And so, we're passionate about it because it's so important. And so to the Time, Talent, and Treasure moniker, I actually heard that many years ago from Reverend Young in Jackson at New Hope in Jackson, Mississippi. But I also just recently heard someone else have a similar sermon about it. And basically he said, if you have, that's basically the three areas of currency that you have, right? So time, talent, treasure, education, or what have you. I think he used education as one of them. But the point was, if you have two, use two to get the other one. So if you have time and talent, use that to get the treasure. If you have treasure and time, use that to invest in your talent, etc. So I think that's the thing that there is a multiplying effect. All of us have all three of those things. And if we don't have one of them, then we can use the other two to get that third thing. So that's all. That's where I'll end it. But thank you so much, Nadrea.
All right. Well, with that, folks, we're signing off for tonight. So goodbye, everybody. Happy homecoming to the Southern University folks. And Jackson State next week.
Homecoming this weekend as well.
And North Carolina A&T is this weekend too. And Spellhouse is next weekend too. It's a lot of
It's a lot happening this week. I think every school in the state, every HBCU in the state of Mississippi is this week, right? I think all of them.
Something to that effect.
And LSU and Tulane and Southern at the same time.
That is correct. Baton Rouge, the hotel
Baton Rouge is going to explode.
Ridiculous.
Yes.
Well, you be safe out there.
Find a spot and stay there. All right, folks, we're signing off for tonight.
Bye.
Take care.